It was at the end of October last year, when it was the perfect hiking weather, as it wasn't too cold or too hot. I have a bunch of friends with whom we go hiking a lot, but most had jobs that wouldn't allow us to hike together. So I often went for short hikes alone, enjoying the peace and quiet. I drove to an excellent hiking spot nearby one Saturday morning. I had hiked there before and always wanted to be there again. It was a loop trail with a big circle from the start. I parked in a small gravel parking lot and headed to the trailhead. The first few miles were flat. I walked through grass fields before eventually heading to a forest at the bottom of a mountain. It was perhaps midday, and I was well in the forest when I noticed a man ahead of me. He was too far, and I couldn't tell whether he was walking away or toward me. I realized he was walking towards me as I continued forward. The trail wasn't popular, and I barely saw anyone the last time I was here. Being on a weekend, I assumed the man was hiking like me. I noticed he didn't have a backpack on as I walked closer. It was weird since I had been down the trail for 6 to 7 hours and knew someone couldn't walk this far, even without a water bottle. The man waved at me when he was a couple of feet away. I waved back as an act of politeness. His footsteps stopped as if he had turned back after passing me. I turned around and saw that he was now facing me. He asked me a strange question. "Where is your group?" Feeling nervous, I told him they were a couple of minutes behind me, as I didn't want to give him the impression that I was on the hike all alone. He smiled and continued down the path. I continued with my hike as time went by. I was still thinking about the guy I met earlier. I wondered why he didn't have a backpack so deep into the forest. My encounter with him was unsettling. I found a nice camping spot on the trail where I felt safe and pitched my tiny tent. It was almost sunset, so I went inside the tent. I finished some pre-packed lunch I had carried for my hike. I then lay down to sleep. I had laid there for about an hour, unable to sleep, when I heard footsteps behind my tent. I froze as I listened to them coming towards me. They only stopped when they were 15 to 20 feet away from my tent. I lay there quietly for what seemed like hours as I tried to listen. I heard no more footsteps, and I knew someone was waiting nearby. Hours passed until it was finally daybreak. I unzipped my tent and peed outside. I saw nothing, so I got out and checked around. I nervously packed up my tent while looking around. I put the tent into my backpack and headed down the trail. But I noticed some footprints behind the tree where I had set up my tent. I panicked and didn't look for more footprints. I sprinted down the trail. I was terrified, knowing that someone was stalking me deep in the forest and I had nowhere safe to run to. I quickly ran to my car, which still took hours but less this time, and drove home. I reported the weird man on the trail to the police, but they did nothing much about it. I decided to be more cautious about the trail I picked from that day henceforth. My job allowed me to travel extensively in my 20s and early 30s. I would only spend a few days in one location, so I had to make the most of my time in a particular area. I was staying in a hotel and had a few days before my flight. I love nature, but my job didn't allow me to spend time outdoors. One day on my off days, I decided to set out on a long trail that took me through pretty forests and trees in that area. I got up early and went to the store to buy hiking gear since I had none. The trail was an hour away from my hotel. I got there at around noon. It seemed nobody was there by the time I arrived. I checked the trail online and saw it would take me 6 hours to explore. I started walking down the path. The first hour was lovely. It was peaceful and stress-relieving walking all alone between the trees. Soon after, as I walked, I saw a man sitting on the ground next to the path. His head was hanging down as if he was sleeping. He had a hoodie covering his face. He looked up at me as I walked closer. The man kept staring down at me as I walked past him. It was somehow creepy. and I kept checking behind for the next few minutes as I walked down the trail. I felt hungry and tired after some hours. Before proceeding, I sat on a log beside the path to have some snacks and rest. I'd been sitting there for about 3 to 4 minutes when the man I walked past appeared towards me. I quickly parked my bag and continued walking down the trail. I heard loud footsteps coming behind me a few minutes later. I turned around and saw the man jogging towards me. I moved to the side, hoping he would pass by, but he stopped in front of me. He didn't say anything, which made me very nervous about him. He reached out to his pocket and brought out an old wallet. "I think you dropped this," he said. The wallet wasn't mine, and I could see it was empty. I told him it wasn't mine, and I hadn't carried mine when I left the hotel. He insisted it was mine and I needed to take it back. I was confused and didn't know what exactly to say or do. I could tell from his eyes that he was beginning to get mad. I was sure he was trying to play a dirty trick on me. I didn't have any choice but to listen to him. I said, "Okay," and I took his wallet. He looked me in the eyes and said I was welcome, as he smiled. He started descending the trail while I stood there for a moment. Confused, I checked the wallet, and there was nothing inside. I was scared to go down behind the man, so I decided to walk back to my car. I tried to enjoy my walk back, but couldn't stop thinking about the incident. I kept becoming nervous as I walked. I constantly kept looking behind to see whether the man was behind. I finally made it to my car when the sun was beginning to set. I noticed the man's shadow coming from behind me as I was a few meters away from my car. I knew running away would end up wrong. I reached into my pockets and felt my car keys. I suddenly entered the car through the passenger door and locked myself in. I could hear the man rush to the driver's side and try opening the door, but I had locked it already. I crawled to the driver's seat as the man was angrily banging on the window, asking me to give him back his wallet. It was the man from earlier in the forest. I ignored him, turned on my car, and reversed to the main road. He ran back into the trees as I drove down the road. I went to the police station I had passed on my way to the trail and reported the man. I left the wallet at the station and drove to my hotel. I was lucky I safely escaped the man without losing anything. My girlfriend and I enjoyed going on camping trips. We used to live in the Appalachian region of Virginia, so we have many camping options around the Appalachian Mountains. We both had stressful work days during the week. Therefore, going on camping trips on the weekend would help us unwind. We had been on countless camping trips in the Appalachian Mountains before, but none ended like the last one. One Saturday morning, we decided to explore an unexploited 3-mile camping trail on the flatter area of the mountain. We parked our camping gear in the truck and drove for 45 minutes. It began raining when we got close to the mountain. We pulled up to the trailhead, a short distance from the road. Only one car was parked by the side. While packing our camping gear, my girlfriend noticed the door of the parked car was open at up a few inches. We looked around for the owner, but they were away. Assuming they might have accidentally left it open, I moved closer to the car to push the door closed. The entire passenger seat was soaked from the rain. I returned to our truck, took our stuff, and went down the trail. The rain started picking up, so we had to walk faster to get to the campsite and set up our tent. It took around 2 hours to get to the campsite. We first noticed a small tent at the center of the flat area. We set our tent at the far corner and sat inside, eating food. We started hearing noises from outside the tent. I checked outside and saw 2 men looking at our tent a few feet away. They introduced themselves and told us they had been staying in the small tent in the middle for some days. We told them we would be there for the night and then zipped our tent. They headed back to their tent, but they seemed to be acting strange. Their tent was too small, and it didn't seem like they had been camping here, as they had said. Time went by, and we didn't hear or see anything weird. We thought the two men were still inside their tent. We got our sleeping bags ready and laid beside my girlfriend as darkness set in. I woke up and heard some feet and noises around our tent. It was still raining, and I checked around but saw only one. Looking at the tent in the middle, I noticed the front zipper was open. I couldn't see well in the dark, but knew no one was in the tent. I shook up my girlfriend so that she could be alert and told her what was happening. We could hear voices behind our tent, but didn't know what to do. Being inside didn't feel safe anymore. I asked my girlfriend to park our stuff as I got outside with a pocket knife. I saw the two men from earlier standing a few feet from our tent. They looked at me with absolutely no emotion. They seemed unscared of me, and I knew they were up to something horrible. My girlfriend came outside and told me we should leave. We left behind our bags and tent and ran towards the rain. I looked back when we got to the edge of the campsite and saw the two men watching us. We got to our truck and saw the parked car was still there, but the passenger seat was open again. We drove down to the nearest gas station and called the police while telling them our location. They came a few minutes later and told them what happened at the campsite. Then we left. We got more terrifying information on what happened at the campsite a few days later. When the police went down to investigate the area, they found a car belonging to an older man who had been filed missing. All the belongings in the car had been stolen. The officers confirmed the tent at the campsite belonged to the missing man. They didn't trace the two men or any evidence apart from their footprints. We were terrified, knowing that we were a few seconds from something horrible that night.